It was a Saturday night when the world as I knew it came crashing down. The kind of evening where the air feels thick with anticipation, yet everything seems so ordinary, almost too ordinary. I had plans to meet my best friend, Jason, at our usual spot. It was supposed to be another night of drinking, shooting the breeze, and swapping the kind of half-joking banter that's part of every deep friendship. Jason had been my closest friend since college, through thick and thin. I had always trusted him, had always believed that our bond was unbreakable. After all, what could be stronger than the relationship built over years of shared experiences? But there was one thing I had never expected, never thought I would have to deal with. Jason's marriage to Megan, his beautiful, loving wife, was supposed to be the rock in his life. And, I had always believed that their relationship was one of the strongest I had ever witnessed. They had been together for as long as I had known him, and they seemed inseparable. Yet, I couldn't have been more wrong. What I would uncover that night would shake me to the core, change everything, and leave me standing in the ruins of trust. The evening had started innocently enough. I arrived at the bar first, as I often did, ordering a beer and taking a seat by the window. The warm light from the street lamps outside flickered, casting a soft glow across the room. The place was practically empty, save for a few regulars nursing their drinks in silence. I pulled out my phone to check for messages, but there was nothing new. I wasn't expecting anything. My thoughts wandered briefly to my girlfriend, Sarah. We had been seeing each other for about a year, and things were going well. It was serious enough that we'd started to talk about the future, something that Jason and I had laughed about during late-night sessions of whiskey shots, dreaming about the days when we'd both be tied down to someone, no longer the carefree bachelors we once were. Jason walked in a few minutes later, looking slightly off. Something in his eyes wasn't quite right. He forced a smile and clapped me on the back, but I could tell there was something eating at him. He ordered his drink without saying much and sat down opposite me. His usually confident, cocky demeanor was replaced with an almost invisible tension. I didn't say anything at first, thinking it was just the weight of the week pressing down on him. But, as we chatted about nothing in particular, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "Everything all right with you and Megan?" I asked casually, leaning back in my seat, watching him. He hesitated for a moment, a flicker of unease flashing across his face before he took a long drink from his glass. Yeah, all good. Just, work's been a bit crazy lately," he replied, though there was an edge to his tone that didn't quite match his words. I nodded, but my gut was telling me something more was going on. Jason wasn't one to hide his emotions, especially when it came to Megan. If things were really that bad, he would have told me, right? But maybe it was just a phase, maybe a rough patch. Couples went through them, I reasoned. What I didn't know then was that the very foundation of Jason's life, the one he had so carefully built over the years, was already crumbling behind closed doors. And I was about to become an unwilling witness to his downfall. I didn't expect anything out of the ordinary that night. Jason seemed distracted, distant even, but I chalked it up to the weight of his professional life. We spent the next hour talking about random things, sports, work, the usual. But all the while, my mind kept drifting back to one thing, Megan. There was something Jason wasn't telling me. Something he was hiding, and that something was about to change everything I thought I knew. The next week started just like any other, or at least it seemed that way at first. But the gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach wouldn't go away. Jason's behavior was still off. He'd become more distant, less engaged, and our usual hangouts felt strained. I'd call him, and sometimes, he wouldn't answer, or he'd cut the conversation short. It wasn't like him, and it made me wonder. Then, one evening, it happened, something I couldn't ignore. I had plans with Sarah, but she'd cancelled last minute. Something about a family emergency. I didn't question it, though, I was used to her unpredictable schedule. So, I decided to grab a drink by myself, thinking I'd run into Jason. As soon as I walked into the bar, the sight that met me froze me in place. There, at a table in the back corner, was Jason. But he wasn't alone. His companion was someone I knew very well. It was Sarah. My girlfriend. My heart skipped a beat, and a cold sweat broke out on my palms. I stood at the entrance for a long moment, unsure of what to do. The two of them were sitting close to one another, laughing, sharing a private joke, their faces inches apart. Jason's usual carefree expression was replaced with something more intimate, something I had never seen before. His arm was draped over the back of Sarah's chair, and she leaned in to whisper something in his ear, her eyes sparkling in a way that felt foreign to me. I felt sick. At first, my mind refused to process what I was seeing. I wanted to believe there was some explanation, maybe they were just friends, maybe they were talking about something important. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't just friendly conversation. The chemistry between them was undeniable. I knew my best friend better than anyone, and I could see it in the way he looked at her, the way she looked at him. There was something between them that shouldn't have been there. I stood there for a moment, my mind racing. The first impulse was to storm over to the table and confront them, to demand answers. But as quickly as the anger rose in me, I squashed it. No. I wasn't going to let them off that easily. I needed to know more. I needed proof. Without making a sound, I backed away from the entrance and slipped quietly out the back door. I wasn't sure why I did it, but something inside me told me to wait. To be patient. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my head. Jason and Sarah. Together. It felt like a betrayal of the highest order. Jason had been my closest friend for years, and Sarah, well, I thought she was the one. The person I could see spending my future with. How had I been so blind? I kept my distance from both of them. I couldn't bring myself to look them in the eye just yet. The anger I had initially felt had morphed into something colder, something darker. I had been lied to. I had been made a fool. But I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. Instead, I decided to gather my thoughts. To watch. To observe. It was then that I came up with a plan. A plan to make sure they couldn't lie their way out of this. A plan that would make sure Jason and Sarah would have to face the consequences of their actions. I decided I would record them. I would gather the evidence I needed, silent, methodical, and patient. Every encounter, every slip-up, every moment they spent together. I would be there, watching from the shadows, capturing it all. I set my plan in motion. I started showing up at the places they frequented, sometimes coincidentally, sometimes not. I took a few quiet trips to the bar, the coffee shop, the park where they sometimes walked together. I was careful. I kept my distance, blending in with the crowd. Each time I saw them together, I carefully recorded their interactions. It was becoming clear that this wasn't a one-time thing. It was an affair, a full-blown betrayal. And I wasn't going to let it go unnoticed. The days that followed felt like I was living in a different world, one where trust had shattered and the reality I had always known was now tainted by deception. Jason and Sarah. The thought echoed in my mind constantly. I was caught in a cruel paradox. I loved Sarah, and I had spent years calling Jason my best friend. Yet here I was, a silent observer to their lies, watching everything I held dear unravel before me. The recordings had started accumulating. Each time I caught them together, each glance, each touch, was like another nail in the coffin of our friendship. There was something so incredibly personal about it, the intimacy between them was palpable, and it made my stomach churn. It wasn't just a fleeting kiss or an innocent hug, it was a connection that felt deep and real, one that should have never existed between two people who were supposed to care about me. I began to see them everywhere. The subtle looks exchanged in the coffee shop, the whispers behind the closed doors of bars, the lingering touches on her shoulder that should have been mine. It wasn't just Jason's betrayal, Sarah's was just as cutting. She had been the one person I had let into my life completely, and now, she was the one tearing it apart. There was one instance that stuck with me the most. It had been a few weeks since I had first caught them, and I was beginning to grow numb to the feeling of betrayal. But that day, something inside me snapped. I was at the gym, minding my business, when I saw them. Jason and Sarah, again. They didn't see me right away, but I saw them clearly. They were standing too close, their voices too soft, their laughter too intimate. Sarah was in a workout outfit, and Jason was leaning in, his hand resting lightly on her back. It was too much. I took a deep breath and calmly walked to the locker room, the anger bubbling beneath the surface but still contained. I wasn't going to lose control, not yet. I had a goal now. The evidence I was collecting would be my weapon. The moment I had planned for, the moment I had been waiting for, was fast approaching. But as much as I told myself I was doing the right thing, waiting, watching, gathering evidence, a small part of me struggled with the guilt. How much of a friend was I becoming, secretly recording the people I cared about in their moments of betrayal? But I couldn't stop now. It was too late to turn back. The next few days were a blur. I kept quiet, kept my distance, and continued to document their interactions. I even started to manipulate situations to gather more proof. I'd meet Jason for lunch, knowing full well that Sarah would be nearby, and I'd quietly watch them interact. It was like a twisted game of cat and mouse. They never suspected anything. I couldn't figure out why Sarah had done this. Why, after all the time we had spent together, after all the moments we had shared, she'd betray me like this. Was it because of something I wasn't giving her? Was it because Jason had something I couldn't offer her? I didn't know the answer, and the more I tried to make sense of it, the more it ate at me. But the one thing I knew for sure was that I had to put an end to this. I needed closure. They both needed to face the truth. The hardest part of all this wasn't the waiting or the recordings. It wasn't the anger that churned inside me every time I watched them together. No, the hardest part was knowing that I wasn't confronting them. I wasn't standing up for myself, for my feelings, for my relationship. I was hiding in the shadows, watching them destroy everything I had worked so hard to build. But if I confronted them directly, they'd deny everything. They'd lie. I knew it. They would brush it off, tell me I was overreacting. I couldn't let that happen. No, I needed to ensure they couldn't wriggle out of this. I needed to have all the evidence, everything they'd done, laid out in front of them. And that's exactly what I was going to do. I wasn't going to be the victim of their lies. I was going to be the one who exposed them. The pieces were coming together now. It was only a matter of time before I made my move. Weeks had passed, and I had gathered more evidence than I thought I ever would need. Every encounter, every private moment between Jason and Sarah was now meticulously documented. It had become an obsession. I would replay the recordings over and over in my mind, each one more damning than the last. I had caught them in their lies, their subtle touches, their stolen glances that spoke louder than words ever could. It had been more than an affair, it was a betrayal of the highest order. I couldn't keep waiting. I had reached a point where the anger no longer simmered beneath the surface, it boiled over with every thought of them. I felt suffocated by the weight of their secrets, by the fact that they were out there, living their lives while I was left in the shadows, plotting their downfall. It wasn't healthy. It wasn't me. But as much as I hated what I was doing, as much as I wanted to confront them, I knew deep down that this was the only way. This wasn't about revenge. This was about truth. And the truth, no matter how painful, was what I needed. I made the decision to confront Jason first. He was my best friend, after all, and as much as it hurt, I owed it to myself to give him a chance to come clean. I had the recordings, the evidence, the undeniable proof of his betrayal. But before I showed him everything, I needed to hear it from him. I needed to see the guilt in his eyes, to hear him admit what I already knew. That night, I invited him over to my apartment. I had set the scene carefully, no distractions, no interruptions. Just the two of us. I couldn't look at him the same way anymore. I wasn't sure if I ever could. But I had to do this. I had to hear the truth from him. He arrived at my place around 8:30 p.m. He seemed unaware of what was about to happen, his usual carefree attitude in full swing. He walked in, gave me a hug, and tossed his keys on the counter like nothing had changed. We grabbed drinks and sat down. The silence between us was heavier than I had expected. I could feel the weight of the moment, the tension that had been building between us for weeks, if not longer. "Jason," I started, my voice steady but cold, "I need you to be honest with me about something. It's about Sarah." He froze for a second, just long enough for me to notice. But then he shook it off, a nervous laugh escaping his lips. "What about her?" he asked, clearly trying to play it off. I didn't waste time. I pulled out my phone and began playing the first recording. The sound of their laughter filled the room. I could see the confusion in Jason's eyes as he listened, but he didn't say a word. I played more, each clip showing them together, the stolen kisses, the intimate touches. When the last clip finished, I looked up at him. His face had gone pale, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something in him that I hadn't before. Guilt. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" I asked, my voice quieter now but no less firm. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes darting away. I could tell he was struggling to come up with something, anything, to explain what had been going on. But there was nothing. Nothing he could say that would make this better. I didn't mean for this to happen," he stammered. It just did. It wasn't supposed to be this way." "Are you really going to stand there and tell me that?" I asked, the anger beginning to rise again. "You're my best friend, Jason. You were supposed to have my back. And you betrayed me with her. With my girlfriend." He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. I could see the tears starting to well up in his eyes, but I didn't feel sorry for him. Not yet. Not after everything he'd done. "I'm sorry, man. I never meant to hurt you. It happened," he whispered, his voice breaking. That was it. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I couldn't believe it. He was begging for forgiveness. He was pleading for me to understand, as if what he had done could somehow be justified. But it couldn't. It would never be enough. I leaned back in my chair, staring at him, letting the silence stretch between us. I needed to see him suffer, just a little. Just long enough for him to feel the weight of what he had done. "I'll give you a chance to fix this," I said finally, my voice a mix of bitterness and cold resolve. "But not with me. Not with Sarah. I'm done." Jason looked as if he wanted to say more, but the words died in his throat. He nodded slowly, as if accepting his fate. But then, something inside me shifted. I had never planned to confront Sarah directly. I had never thought about what it would feel like to face her. But as I watched Jason crumble before me, I realized something: she needed to know. She needed to see the truth. After Jason left that night, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and emptiness. I had exposed his betrayal, made him face the consequences of his actions, but I hadn't felt the release I had expected. The anger still churned inside me, thick and heavy, and now it was directed at Sarah. I had given Jason the chance to explain himself, but in the back of my mind, I knew the truth about her was just as damning. She had been a part of this, an active participant in the lies and deceit that had shattered everything I held dear. I couldn't put it off any longer. I needed to confront her. But how? The confrontation had to be different. I couldn't simply show up at her place and demand answers. No, I had to make sure she felt the weight of her actions, just as Jason had. She needed to see how much she had hurt me, how much she had betrayed me, and it had to come from her own lips. I needed her to beg for forgiveness, just like he had. I thought about how best to do this. I didn't want to go to her apartment, where she could deflect or avoid the situation. I needed her to be cornered, trapped in her own lies. It had to be a public place. A place where there would be no escape for her, where she would be forced to confront what she had done. It was then that I decided. The park. We had spent so many afternoons there, walking, talking, laughing. It was a place that was intimate to both of us, a place where we had shared some of our most vulnerable moments. If there was any place that could break her down, it was there. The next day, I called Sarah. My voice was calm, steady. I didn't want to give away anything, to show any hint of what I knew. I needed her to meet me, and I needed her to think everything was normal. I was thinking about meeting up at the park later. You free? I asked. There was a pause on the other end. I could almost hear her hesitate before replying. Yeah, sure. What time? Let's say 4 p.m. I'll be there, I said, keeping the conversation as casual as possible. All right. I'll see you then, she said, her voice light. I hung up and stared at my phone for a moment, my chest tight. I couldn't stop the thoughts from flooding my mind. What would I say to her? How could I make her understand how deeply she had hurt me? It wasn't just the affair, it was the betrayal of our trust, of our relationship. She had known Jason was my best friend. She had known how much he meant to me. And yet, she had gone behind my back. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but I couldn't back down. I couldn't let her walk away from this without facing the consequences. The hours between our phone call and meeting felt like an eternity. I tried to keep my mind occupied, but everything I did seemed to lead me back to Sarah. How could she have done this? How could she have betrayed me in such a way? Finally, the time came. I walked to the park early, choosing a spot near the benches where we had spent so many afternoons. I wanted to make sure I had the high ground, that she couldn't escape. I sat down, waiting for her to arrive. My heart was pounding, my stomach twisted in knots. But I knew this was the right thing to do. When Sarah showed up, she was smiling, as if nothing had changed. Her face brightened when she saw me, and for a moment, I almost believed everything was fine. But then, as she got closer, I saw the slight hesitation in her step. Her smile faltered for just a second. She knew something was off. I could feel it. Hey, she said, her voice soft as she sat next to me. How's everything? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I pulled out my phone and showed her the recordings, one by one. The first clip was of her and Jason laughing in the coffee shop, their faces so close, the chemistry between them undeniable. I could see her eyes widen as she watched herself, as she realized what I was showing her. I started, my voice tight with emotion. You're really going to sit there and act like this never happened? Like I don't know what you've been doing? She looked up at me, her face pale. She started, but her voice broke. You've been sleeping with my best friend, Sarah, I said, my words sharp and unforgiving. Behind my back. I thought I could trust you, but this is something I can never unsee. Her eyes welled up with tears, and she reached out, her hand trembling. Please, don't do this. I didn't mean for it to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. I pulled away from her, not wanting her touch. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her regret. What I needed was for her to understand the depth of her betrayal, to truly feel the weight of the choices she had made. Did you ever stop to think about how this would affect me? I asked, my voice breaking. You knew how much Jason meant to me. You knew how much I loved you. And I stopped myself, fighting back the tears. You ruined everything. She fell silent, unable to meet my gaze. The realization had hit her, and there was nothing left for her to say. The truth had been laid bare. I can't do this anymore, Sarah, I whispered, my heart breaking. I can't forgive you. Not this time. The silence that followed our confrontation in the park felt like a weight pressing down on me, suffocating any last remnants of hope I had clung to. I stood there, watching Sarah, who was now crying openly, her hands shaking as she wiped at her tears. But there was nothing inside me that felt sorry for her. No part of me wanted to comfort her. The anger had consumed me, and all I could focus on was the hollow emptiness in my chest. I didn't know how long we stood there, the park slowly emptying around us, but eventually, she turned to leave. She didn't say another word. There was nothing left to say, really. She had been caught. The truth was out, and it had done more than just shatter my relationship with her. It had severed something deeper, something that could never be repaired. I watched her walk away, her shoulders hunched, her body language one of defeat. Part of me had hoped she would beg me to reconsider, that she would promise to make things right. But I knew deep down that I had already made my decision. I didn't need her apology, I needed her to understand the gravity of what she had done. And she did. At least, I hoped she did. After she left, I walked back to my apartment, each step feeling heavier than the last. The weight of the betrayal had become an unbearable burden. I had lost two people I cared about in the same night. Jason, my best friend, had stabbed me in the back. Sarah, the woman I thought I was building a future with, had shattered my trust in ways I didn't think were possible. When I arrived home, I collapsed onto the couch, feeling numb. The recordings on my phone were a constant reminder of everything that had happened. I thought I would feel relief, closure, but instead, I felt empty. I had exposed the truth, but it hadn't fixed anything. It hadn't healed the wound. It was still there, raw and open, festering with the sting of betrayal. I spent the next few days in a daze. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to face the world. The thought of Jason, of Sarah, of everything that had been broken, consumed me. It was as though the fabric of my life had been torn apart, and I was left to pick up the pieces. But how do you rebuild something when the foundation has been completely destroyed? How do you go on when the people you trusted most have been the ones to hurt you the most? There were moments when I thought about reaching out to Jason, trying to salvage our friendship. But each time I picked up my phone, I remembered the way he had begged for forgiveness, how he had tried to justify what he had done. The words he said felt empty, meaningless. I had known him for years, but in that moment, I realized I didn't know him at all. I didn't know how long I sat there, lost in my thoughts, before my phone buzzed. It was a message from Jason. I'm sorry, man. I know I fucked up. Please, let me fix this. I don't want to lose our friendship over this. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. A part of me wanted to forgive him. He was my best friend. But another part of me, the part that was hurt and betrayed, knew that forgiveness was too easy. It didn't erase the damage he had done. I didn't reply. Not yet. The next few days passed in a blur. I avoided the places we used to hang out. I stayed away from mutual friends, too. I couldn't stand the thought of seeing Jason and Sarah together, pretending like nothing had happened. It was too much to bear. But life didn't stop. The world didn't care about my pain. I still had to go to work, still had to go through the motions of daily life. And as much as I wanted to shut myself off from everything, I couldn't. There was no escaping the reality of what had happened. No amount of time would make the hurt go away. And then, one evening, as I was sitting at my kitchen table, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Sarah. I'm so sorry for everything. I never meant to hurt you. I've been a terrible person. Please, can we talk? I stared at her message, feeling a wave of disgust wash over me. There it was again. The apology. The begging. She had no idea how much she had destroyed. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about everything that came before it, the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal of trust. She hadn't just betrayed me as a partner, she had betrayed me as a person, as someone who had opened up to her and trusted her with my heart. I didn't reply to her message either. I didn't know if I ever would. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of the betrayal I had endured refused to lessen. Jason's message sat there on my phone, unopened, and Sarah's apology lingered in the back of my mind. But I couldn't bring myself to respond to either of them. It felt like I was caught in a suspended moment, existing in a limbo between the past and the future, unable to move forward but unwilling to look back. In the silence that followed our confrontations, I spent a lot of time reflecting on everything. The friendship I had with Jason, the love I had for Sarah, they both felt like distant memories now. My thoughts kept returning to that day in the park, when everything was exposed. I had made the decision then to walk away from both of them, but the aftermath wasn't as simple as I had imagined. My mind would wander, replaying the conversations I'd had with both of them, questioning where I had gone wrong. But there was no clear answer. It wasn't about me. It was about them, their choices, their actions. The one thing I realized was that I had spent so long focusing on their betrayal that I had neglected myself. I had neglected the person who mattered most in this entire mess, me. I had allowed their actions to define me, to dictate my emotions, and it was time to stop. I threw myself into my work, trying to fill the void with productivity. It wasn't the healthiest coping mechanism, but it was something I could control. The work didn't offer much of a distraction, though. Every time I finished a task, my mind would inevitably drift back to them. It was like a constant hum in the background of my life, Jason and Sarah, and the devastation they had left behind. The phone never stopped buzzing. Friends reached out, trying to check on me, to make sure I was okay, but I wasn't. How could I be? I had been betrayed by the two people I had trusted most. And as much as I wanted to scream, to lash out, I knew that wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't bring back the trust that had been broken, the love that had been shattered. But then, one evening, I received a message that made my stomach churn. It was from Megan, the woman who had been married to Jason, the one I had never expected to become a part of this tangled mess. I need to talk to you. Can you meet me tomorrow? I know about everything. I stared at the message for a long time, unsure of how to respond. Megan had always been a kind, quiet presence in my life. She had never shown any signs of suspicion or distrust. I had always thought of her as someone who didn't deserve to be dragged into all of this. But now, it seemed, the truth was finally catching up with Jason, and with all of us. I took a deep breath and replied. Sure. I'll be there. The next day, I arrived at the cafe where Megan had asked me to meet her. I wasn't sure what to expect. I had always liked her, and the idea of sitting across from her, knowing what had happened between her husband and my girlfriend, felt like a betrayal of its own. But I couldn't avoid it any longer. I had to face the consequences of the choices that had been made. When I walked in, I saw her sitting at a table near the window, her head down, her hands wrapped tightly around a coffee cup. She looked older than I remembered, tired, worn down. She hadn't heard me approach, so I took a seat across from her. She looked up when I sat down, and her eyes met mine. There was no anger there, no judgment, only sorrow. I don't know how to begin, Megan said softly, her voice shaky. I don't know how to process any of this. I've been married to Jason for over 10 years, and everything I thought I knew about our relationship was a lie. How could he do this to me? I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell her that I didn't have the answers, that Jason's betrayal wasn't her fault. But I couldn't bring myself to speak. I just sat there, listening to her words as they tumbled out, her pain spilling into the air between us. I found out last week, she continued. I started seeing little things, messages on his phone, unexplained absences, his nervousness when I asked him about work. It didn't take long for me to put the pieces together. I confronted him, and he finally admitted it. He told me everything. I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, and for the first time, I felt a pang of guilt. Megan didn't deserve this. None of this was her fault, yet here she was, just as shattered as I was. He told me about you and Sarah, Megan said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I never wanted to be the one to find out like this. But I couldn't let it go on. I couldn't let him keep lying to me. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had spent so much time focused on Jason and Sarah, consumed by the need to expose their betrayal, that I had completely forgotten about Megan. She had been blindsided, just like I had. She had trusted Jason in the same way I had trusted Sarah. And now, her whole world had been turned upside down. I'm sorry, too, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted any of this to happen. Megan shook her head. You didn't do this. Jason did. And Sarah, too. But I don't know where to go from here. I don't know what to do with all this pain. I didn't have any answers for her. I didn't have the solution to her broken heart, just as I didn't have one for my own. All I could do was sit there, listening, offering what little comfort I could. After my meeting with Megan, everything started to settle into a kind of strange, uncomfortable quiet. The storm had passed, and now I was left standing in the wreckage of what had been a once strong, trusted relationship with both Jason and Sarah. In some ways, it felt like the weight had been lifted, no more secrets, no more waiting for the truth to surface. But in other ways, the silence was more deafening than the chaos. I felt a loss like nothing I had ever experienced before. Megan and I had talked for a while longer, sharing our mutual pain, our hurt, and our confusion. We didn't have many answers, and we didn't have any promises of moving forward. But in some small way, it felt like we had shared a burden, something that neither of us could carry alone. I didn't know what her next steps would be, and I wasn't sure what mine were either, but I could tell that we were both at a crossroads. Life had dealt us a brutal hand, and now, we had to decide how we were going to play it. Jason didn't reach out again. After our confrontation, I hadn't heard a word from him. At first, I waited for an apology, for some kind of explanation, but I soon realized that nothing he could say would ever make this right. The words were empty, and his actions spoke louder than anything he could try to apologize for. Our friendship was gone, lost in the mess he had created. I couldn't go back. I didn't even want to. What was once a bond forged through years of shared memories had been shattered beyond repair. And I, for the first time, felt a freedom in letting it go. Sarah, on the other hand, didn't stop trying. The texts, the phone calls, they kept coming. She sent me messages every day, apologizing for what she had done, begging for a chance to make it right. I didn't respond to any of them. Every message was like salt in an open wound, each word reminding me of her betrayal, of the lies she had told to my face. But still, she tried. Finally, one night, after I had ignored her for weeks, I received a message from her that stopped me in my tracks. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just wanted to tell you that I understand if you never want to see me again. But I need you to know that I loved you. And I'm sorry. It was the last thing I expected to hear. Her words, stripped of any excuse or justification, hit me harder than I thought they would. There was no plea, no attempt to downplay the betrayal. Just an acknowledgement of the damage she had caused. I sat with that message for a long time. There was no sense of victory in it, no satisfaction. I hadn't wanted to hurt her, hadn't wanted any of this. But what I had wanted more than anything was the truth. And in the end, that's what I got. I thought back to the moment when I had confronted them both. I had expected some grand sense of closure, but instead, I had only felt emptiness. What was the point of exposing the truth if it didn't heal the wounds? The truth was important, but it didn't undo the damage. It didn't fill the hole that had been left behind by their betrayal. So, I did what I had to do. I moved on. Slowly, painfully, but surely, I started rebuilding my life. I surrounded myself with the people who truly cared about me. I went back to doing things I loved, things that made me feel alive again. The pain didn't go away, but it dulled over time. And I realized that forgiveness, in some ways, was the hardest part. It wasn't for them, it was for me. I still think about Jason and Sarah sometimes, about the life we could have had if they had never made those choices. I think about Megan and what she's going through, what we've both been through. But I no longer live in the past. I've learned that the most important thing I can do now is move forward. The truth had been exposed. The betrayal had been laid bare. And now, I had to let go of the anger and the hurt. I had to learn to live without the people I thought I could count on. But I knew one thing for sure, I would never again let anyone have that kind of power over me. And, eventually, I found peace. It wasn't quick, and it wasn't easy, but I found it.